Kai'Sa has a 50% win rate in Elite right now. She's the most popular character in the game. She's probably OP. Kai'Sa nerfs incoming. I mean, I'm not the one who would nerf Kai'Sa. My general personal perspective on Kai'Sa is that when her pick rate goes to the moon in Challenger, it is often a representation of her current build and power level lacking weaknesses. And right now, her pick rate is to the moon in Challenger. It's like 50% or something. Did NAAFIRI achieve the goal of being easy to play assassin for new players? Last I checked, she has a lower pick rate in Bronze than Talon or Zed. So here's some things that are really important to think about when you make that statement. So question 1 for chat. Are Bronze players new players? Some Bronze players are new players. And it is very unlikely that Diamond players are new players, although they can be. The first thing I want you to, that is very important to understand, is that I think very often the League community, when it talks about things, gets bad player or low MMR player confused with new player. And they're two completely different things. A new player can be a bad player. A new player can be low MMR. But a new player is not necessarily a Bronze player. There are players with thousands of games in Bronze. The second thing is that a tutorial character or a character who's for newer players does not necessarily mean that they have to be popular, right? They have to have a minimum level of popularity. Like, I think after we nerfed NAAFIRI that one time and she went to like almost no play rate, that was not great. That was not ideal. But nowadays she has an above average play rate. The goal of NAAFIRI was a low complexity assassin. And the reason low complexity relates to a potential new player is there are certain types of players who are coming in to play League of Legends, and giving them tons of mechanics is not an ideal way for them to learn or enjoy the game. And so the goal of a character like NAAFIRI is actually very similar to the goal of a character like Garen or like SONA. SONA is not the most popular enchanter, but she occupies a very important spot in the enchanter roster in that she is probably one of the least mechanically demanding champions in the game. And that serves a certain type of new player who probably doesn't have the mechanical skill yet to really go deep on a champion mechanically. And so having a character who is very simple to play allows them to focus on other parts of the game. And that is what NAAFIRI is attempting to serve. Whether or not that's successful is another question. But mainly, the concept of new player is divorced from the concept of player who's not very good. And here's another part, there's another thing that's important. Not every new player wants to play champions who are easy. Some new players want to play Yasuo. In fact, an astounding amount of them want to play Yasuo. Yasuo is one of our more popular champions for new players. And you might be like, that doesn't make any sense. He's so complicated. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. A lot of people, the reason they're getting into League is because they want to play something hard. A lot of people who get into Valorant, they start playing Jett, right? Because they see all the pop-offs of Jett, and they're like, I want to play that character. Very, very, very high skill, right? And so NAAFIRI is intended to be a character that is simple to play for a type of newer player that is looking to not heavily index into a mechanical life of League of Legends. Someone asked, what about Talon? Isn't he easy and low skill? He was before his rework. Talon actually occupied NAAFIRI's space before we reworked him. The reason Talon no longer occupies NAAFIRI's space is a significant level of power in Talon's kit is allocated to roaming, which is very, very inaccessible pattern for new and lower MMR players. Talon nowadays is actually a very high MMR skewed character for like Diamond Plus players and players who played for a while. Because if you're a newer player and you want to play Talon, a whole swath of his kit just won't be intuitive to you and won't make sense and won't be usable, which is the the indexing into roaming that the character requires to be effective at him. Old Talon, on the other hand, was a noob cannon. He was a character for like, you know, very, very straightforward. Push buttons on enemy. You've done it. You've succeeded. Basically, just if you're wondering about NAAFIRI, it is not important that she is the most popular. It is important that she has some, you know, level of popularity, but just like SONA, the value she adds to the game is not by being the most popular champion in bronze. That's going to be Zed. That's going to be YASUO. Because it turns out that regardless of how new you are or how good you are at the game, those characters are just kind of what most people who play League want to play. NAAFIRI is intended to open up the assassin space to a group of players who normally wouldn't be able to access it because of the amount of mechanical input you have to put into the characters, or map mobility input, things like that. Any plans for Mythics? I love that system. If you liked the Mythic system, I have bad news for you. The Mythic system ended up being fairly bad for the game in many, many different ways, which is why we ended up removing it. So if you liked that system, I don't think it would come back, at least in mainline League of Legends. One of the major issues it had is that it reduced choice in the item system. It reduced choice in the item system and then just reduced the ability to like balance items in a lot of different ways. Basically kind of like homogenized builds around what your character, was your character OP with a certain mythic item, basically. Just had a lot of like pretty rough outputs for how items work in League of Legends as a whole. Easy way to think about it is stuff like support items. So before the mythic items, supports could rush whatever they want, which is true right now. Once the mythic items came out, as a support, you have to rush your mythic, you have to care about your support item, and most games that ends up meaning that you only get to really choose one item, which is pretty rough as a support. Versus without mythics, like you'll have, you know, more choices and more things that can feel like better for your champion specifically. That was another issue with mythics, is that mythic items basically required to truly work. We needed a lot of them, probably twice as many as we had. And the reason for that is, you might be like, well, why do you need a lot of mythic items for them to work? Is that not every character makes sense with every mythic item. And so to make it so that like the system had choice and it felt like, as well as like having items that feel good on individual champions, you need more. Like as an example, the mythic item system until the very end didn't have an on-hit item except for Ginsu's Rageblade, right? And then we put that one at the end. And so you had this thing where it's like, as example with supports, many supports were just building Moonstone Renewer every game because it was just like, well, this is one of the few things that worked for them, but it didn't work on every support. And so you had a lot of times where you felt like you were being forced to buy an item that just somewhat worked on you, which was pretty rough. So yeah, basically it's like, I think the Mystic system could have worked if like we had like twice as many of them and things like that, but it ended up creating like a lot of negative outcomes for items as a whole, unfortunately, in terms of just characters feeling good about what they were purchasing and feeling like they could actually like buy items that made sense in the game they were in on the character they were on.